On a distant planet far from Earth, Nira and Evan had developed an unusual friendship. Nira was an alien girl from the Zithar people, a race known for their strength, wisdom, and history of mighty warriors. She had large, bright eyes that seemed to see right through people, and her laughter was infectious. She had spent many hours exploring human culture with Evan, who had been sent to her planet as part of an exchange program between Earth and the Zithar. Evan was a soldier, strong and disciplined, but there was something about Nira that made him feel relaxed, like he could let down his guard and just enjoy the simple things. One day, while Nira was showing Evan around the ancient halls of her family's estate, she led him into a room that seemed different from all the others. The walls were lined with artifacts and the air was thick with the weight of history. At the center of the room stood an object that seemed to glow faintly, a suit of armor placed on a pedestal. The armor was beautiful, crafted from a metal that shimmered with a golden hue. It had intricate engravings, each telling a story of battles fought long ago, of victory and loss, of ancestors who had once stood in defense of their people. "That's my ancestor's armor," Nira said, a hint of pride in her voice. She had told Evan many stories about her people, but this one seemed different. It was worn by Derek, one of the greatest warriors in Zithar history. They say no one has ever worn it since he passed. It's been passed down from generation to generation as a symbol of strength, honor, and courage. Evan couldn't help but be impressed by the armor's beauty and significance. He had heard stories of powerful warriors in both human history and alien cultures, but this armor seemed to have a life of its own. The engravings on the surface sparkled in the dim light, almost as if they were alive, telling their own silent story. "Can I try it on?" Evan asked, half joking, half curious. Nira's eyes widened and she laughed. "No, you can't just try it on. It's sacred. It's not meant to be worn by just anyone, only those who prove themselves worthy." Evan smirked, tapping his chest with mock confidence. "I'm sure I'm worthy. After all, I'm a soldier. We're trained for stuff like this." Nira rolled her eyes, clearly amused by his playful challenge. "You wouldn't last 5 minutes in that armor. It's heavy and it's not for show. It's been locked away for centuries. I bet I could handle it," Evan said, grinning. He had always been good-natured and loved a challenge, but he also wanted to impress Nira. Nira, knowing that she had already won the argument, hesitated for a moment before an idea flashed across her mind. With a mischievous grin, she said, "All right, you want to try it? But don't say I didn't warn you. I'll be right here to watch you fail miserably." Her tone was playful, and Evan, sensing her challenge, accepted it without a second thought. He walked toward the armor with a sense of excitement, eager to prove her wrong. He couldn't help but admire the detailed craftsmanship as he carefully reached out to touch the cool surface of the armor. He could feel its weight, but it didn't seem impossible to lift. "This is incredible," Evan murmured as he started to put the pieces on. "It feels different, though. Like it's alive." Nira, standing a few feet away with an amused expression, was about to respond when something strange happened. The moment Evan's hands made contact with the armor, a faint glow appeared on the surface. It was subtle at first, but it grew brighter as Evan continued to adjust the pieces. He felt a strange pulse of energy run through him. But he dismissed it as nothing more than his imagination playing tricks on him. Once the armor was fully on, Evan stood up straighter, feeling an unexpected weight press down on his shoulders. The armor was indeed heavy, but it felt like something else was there. Something inside him, like a part of the past reaching out to connect with him. "See? Told you I could handle it," Evan said, trying to sound casual. But the truth was, the armor felt oddly comfortable, almost as if it belonged to him. Nira watched him closely. There was something different about the way he was standing, the way he was moving. She had expected him to struggle under the weight, but instead he looked almost at peace. "I guess you can wear it," Nira said, her tone more serious now. "But don't get too cocky. My ancestors were warriors. They didn't just wear the armor for fun. They lived by a code, a way of life." Evan nodded, feeling a sudden respect for the history of the armor. He wasn't sure why, but it felt important now, more than just a piece of decoration. It felt like he was standing on the edge of something bigger than himself. Nira stepped closer, studying him with growing curiosity. "You don't look like a soldier anymore, Evan," she said softly. "It's like you're becoming something else." Evan laughed awkwardly. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," Nira said, taking a cautious step back. "It's just the way you're standing. Like you're not just you anymore." Before Evan could respond, the ground beneath them trembled. It was a slight shake at first, but then it grew stronger, until the entire room seemed to rumble. The walls vibrated and the light around them flickered. The sudden disturbance sent a chill down Nira's spine. "What's happening?" Evan asked, his voice tinged with concern as he looked around, trying to make sense of the situation. Nira's eyes widened in fear. "I don't know. This shouldn't be happening." The light from the armor seemed to grow brighter now, casting an eerie glow across the room. Evan's hands clenched at his sides, and for the first time he felt something more than just the weight of the armor. It was like a presence was awakening inside him, something ancient, something powerful. I don't think this armor is just a relic," Evan muttered, his voice strained. "It feels like it's alive." Nira's heart skipped a beat. She had heard the legends, but she had never truly believed them. Her ancestors had spoken of the armor's power, but it had always been considered just a story, a myth. But now, standing in front of her, was a human who had unknowingly awakened something far beyond either of them. The armor wasn't just a piece of history. It was an artifact, a conduit for the spirit of a warrior long gone. And it was calling to Evan, urging him to awaken it fully. Nira took a step back, her mind racing. "Evan, you have to take it off now." But it was too late. The moment she spoke, the armor's glow intensified, and Evan felt his body surge with a strange energy. The power was undeniable now. The warrior spirit inside the armor had been awakened, and it wasn't going to be ignored. Evan, though frightened, didn't move. Instead, he closed his eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the rush of power fill him. The visions came next. Images of distant battles, of swords clashing and shields breaking, of warriors fighting for their lives. He saw the face of Derek, the legendary ancestor who had once worn this very armor. The warrior's eyes burned with the same intensity that Evan now felt. And then, Evan understood. The armor was never meant to be a prank. It was a gift and a curse, and now he was its new bearer. Evan stood in the middle of the ancient chamber, his body locked in place by the strange energy flowing through the armor. He could feel it now, an undeniable power, as if the armor was no longer just a piece of metal and leather, but something alive, something ancient. The glow of the armor's engravings brightened, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. The air around him felt charged, like static before a storm. He tried to move, to take the armor off, but his hands felt frozen. The weight of the metal was no longer the only thing holding him in place. It was something deeper, something pulling at his very soul. Nira stood just a few feet away, her face pale with shock. She had never seen anything like this before. The legends spoke of the armor's power, but she had always thought it was just a story until now. She had seen Evan struggle to put it on, but she hadn't expected this. The armor had always been a symbol of strength, a reminder of the great warriors who had fought for her people. But now it seemed to have awakened something inside Evan, something far beyond anything they had anticipated. "Evan, you need to take it off." Nira's voice was urgent, trembling slightly. She stepped forward, reaching out to him, but stopped just short, as though something invisible was holding her back. "This isn't just a prank anymore. This is dangerous." Evan's head snapped to the side, his eyes wide as he looked at her. He could hear her voice, but it felt distant, like he was underwater. His vision blurred, and in the space between the blur and clarity he saw flashes of ancient warriors, men and women, their faces fierce with determination, their bodies cloaked in the very armor he wore. He could hear their battle cries, their footsteps as they charged into combat. The images came faster, more vivid, and the next moment, Evan felt himself moving, almost without his control. His arms lifted, flexing the muscles beneath the armor as if he had been trained for this his entire life. His breath came in shallow gasps, and his heart pounded in his chest. The power of the armor was overwhelming, filling every part of him. He wanted to shout, to scream, but the words wouldn't come. In his mind, he could hear the voice of a man, strong and firm, as though speaking from a place deep inside the armor itself. "You are weak, human, but you carry the strength of your will. Show me you can command this power." Evan's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white. "What is happening to me?" he thought, his mind racing. He looked at Nira, and for a moment, he could almost feel the warrior spirit inside him pushing him forward, urging him to embrace the power. His body itched for action, for battle, but Nira's voice broke through his thoughts. "Evan, listen to me. You're not supposed to wear it. It wasn't meant for humans." The words were like a slap to the face, but Evan didn't react. Instead, he raised his arm and flexed it, feeling the power coursing through his muscles. The armor seemed to respond to his movements, adjusting itself to his body, as if it were alive, adapting to him. He was no longer just a soldier. He felt like something more, something ancient, something powerful. Nira's heart raced. She had read the stories, but this was real. The armor was not meant to be worn by anyone outside her people, and it was not meant to be worn by someone who had not been trained in their ways. But there Evan stood, his eyes glazed, his movements controlled by something she couldn't understand. "Stop, Evan," Nira called out again, her voice tinged with fear. "You don't know what you're doing." But Evan couldn't stop. His muscles burned with the power of the armor, and his mind seemed to split into two parts. One part desperately trying to hold on to his humanity, and the other part, the part that was now awake, consumed by the spirit of the warrior who had once worn this armor. "Derek," the spirit whispered again, "you are not just a soldier. You are a protector. Fight." With those words, the armor began to resonate even more intensely, like a drumbeat echoing through his chest. Evan's body moved on its own accord, his feet shifting into a battle stance, his hands raised as if to wield a weapon. But no weapon was in his hands, only the power of the armor. It was as if the very essence of battle had taken root in him. Nira watched in horror as Evan's transformation continued. It was like witnessing someone lose themselves completely to the past. She had read about the armor's power to channel the spirits of warriors, but she never imagined it would be like this. The legends had always warned that the armor could awaken the warrior spirit only if the wearer was strong enough to control it. But Evan was human. He wasn't prepared for this. "Evan, please," she cried, stepping forward again. "You don't have to do this. Take it off. You don't have to fight." For the briefest moment, Evan hesitated. He looked at her, his eyes coming back into focus. He could see the fear in Nira's eyes, the concern that had grown into something deeper. But as the seconds ticked by, the pull of the spirit, the weight of the armor, grew stronger. It was as if Derek's spirit was speaking directly to him now. "Your path is clear. You must fight." Evan's breath hitched. He could feel his body responding to the command, but his mind, his human mind, fought against it. The armor's energy had become overwhelming. He could feel it surging through his veins, and it felt as if his very heart was beating in sync with the armor's glow. The longer he wore it, the more distant his thoughts became. Then it happened. The armor reacted, almost as if it were alive. Evan's legs moved before he could stop them, and in a blur of motion, his fist slammed into the wall. The force of the impact cracked the stone, sending dust and debris flying through the air. Nira gasped, stepping back in shock. "Evan, no!" She watched, helpless, as Evan turned toward her, his face no longer his own. It was as if the armor had taken over entirely. But there was still a part of him, a small part, that fought to stay grounded. Through the chaos, Evan managed to lock eyes with Nira. For a split second he could see her, really see her, and in that moment something within him flickered, a connection to his humanity that refused to die. "Evan," Nira whispered, taking a step closer. She had to help him, but how? The room was filled with a tense silence as Evan's movements slowed. His body was no longer acting on its own, but neither was he in full control. He could still feel the spirit of Derek pushing him forward. He wanted to break free, to take the armor off, but the urge to fight was strong. Nira's voice was soft, almost pleading. "Evan, don't listen to him. You're stronger than this. You can fight it." Evan's body jerked like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. His hand lifted as if to strike, but then it froze. The moment passed, and for the first time since putting on the armor, Evan was still. "I can't stop," Evan muttered, his voice strained. The struggle was clear in his eyes. He was fighting the spirit inside him, but it was an uneven battle. Nira, desperate and unsure what else to do, stepped closer, placing her hand on his shoulder. "You're still you, Evan. You're not Derek. You don't have to become him." Evan's hand trembled, then dropped slowly to his side. He took a shaky breath, the glow of the armor dimming just slightly. The voice of Derek faded, leaving only the silence between them. Nira's heart pounded as she watched him, waiting for any sign that the human soldier she knew was still there. Slowly, cautiously, Evan raised his head, and for the first time since he had donned the armor, he smiled. I think I'm still me," he said, though his voice was strained, as if the battle inside him was far from over. But the danger wasn't gone. The armor was still powerful. and whatever force had awoken inside him was not easily subdued. Nira knew this wasn't over yet. The true test was still ahead. Evan took a slow, deep breath as the power of the armor seemed to pulse around him. The strange energy that had overwhelmed him earlier had quieted for now, but he could still feel its presence just beneath the surface. It wasn't gone. It wasn't finished with him. He lowered his head, staring down at the intricate engravings of the armor that now clung to his body. The symbols seemed to flicker faintly in the dim light of the room. He was no longer sure if it was his imagination, but they seemed to shift as if they were alive, changing in ways he couldn't fully understand. Nira stepped closer, cautiously, watching him closely. The fear had not completely left her face, but now there was something else there, curiosity and perhaps a little hope. She had seen Evan struggle, seen him lose control to the power of the armor, but now he seemed different. Maybe, just maybe, he could regain control. But she knew it wouldn't be easy. "Are you okay?" Nira asked softly, her voice filled with a mixture of concern and uncertainty. Evan didn't immediately respond. His eyes were distant, locked onto the glowing engravings on the armor. He could still hear the voice of Derek, the ancient warrior spirit, whispering in his mind, "You must embrace your destiny, human." He shook his head, trying to push the voice away, but it was like a constant hum in the back of his mind. "I don't know, Nira. I'm not sure who's in control anymore." The words hung heavy in the air between them. He could feel the spirit of Derek pushing him, urging him to fight to prove his worth. But he wasn't sure if he wanted that. Was this really the path for him? Or was he just being swept along by forces beyond his control? Nira stood quietly, her gaze fixed on Evan. She had heard the stories about the armor, the stories of her ancestors who had fought great battles in it. She knew that the armor had once been worn by one of the greatest warriors in Zithar history, but she never imagined that it would affect someone like this. Evan was human, not one of her people. He hadn't been trained in their ways. He wasn't meant to wear it. She wanted to help him, but she didn't know how. She wasn't even sure where to begin. After a long pause, Evan turned his gaze to her. "I don't think I can take it off. It's like it's become a part of me." Nira's heart sank. "That's not possible," she whispered. "The armor wasn't meant for anyone outside my people. It doesn't work like this. It can't." But Evan looked at her with a strange, distant expression. "I don't know how, but it's happening. The power, it's in me now, Nira, and I can't get rid of it." Nira felt a deep knot in her stomach. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had always known the legends of the armor, but she had never thought they could be real. The armor was supposed to be a symbol of strength and honor, a reminder of past victories, but now it felt more like a curse than a blessing. Evan's breathing grew heavier, his chest rising and falling with each strained breath. The glow of the armor flickered, and for a moment, Nira could see it, the face of Derek, his stern expression imprinted in the metal, as if the ancient warrior himself were watching Evan. Evan's hand twitched, his fingers flexing as if they were reaching for something. Nira could see it in his eyes. He was losing himself again. The spirit of Derek was gaining control. She had to do something before it was too late. "Evan!" she shouted, stepping forward, placing her hand on his arm. "You have to fight it. You don't have to become Derek. You don't have to let this armor control you." Evan's eyes flickered, and for a moment it looked as if he was fighting himself. The armor seemed to pulse as though it was rejecting Nira's touch. He staggered backward, his face contorted in frustration. His voice, when it came, was strained, almost unrecognizable. I can't stop it, Nira," he gasped. "The armor, it's alive. It's taking me over." Nira's heart raced as she watched him. She had to find a way to help him. She had to break through to him before the spirit of Derek completely overtook him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound in the room was Evan's labored breathing and the soft hum of the armor's energy. Then, slowly, Nira took a step back, her mind racing as she thought about the legends she had grown up with. The stories of warriors who had worn the armor, who had fought with honor and strength. And then it hit her. The armor was more than just a weapon. It was a test of will. Only those who proved themselves worthy could truly wield its power. That was what the legend said. But Evan wasn't just anyone. He was different. He wasn't from this world, but maybe, just maybe, that was why he could succeed where others had failed. "Evan," she said, her voice soft yet firm, "you don't have to fight the armor. You need to understand it. You need to control it, not let it control you. He looked at her, his eyes clouded with confusion. How? Listen to me, Nira said, stepping closer once more. The armor is not just a suit of metal. It's a part of our history, a part of who we are. The warriors who wore it before you didn't just fight battles, they knew themselves. They knew their strengths and their weaknesses, and they accepted them. Evan seemed to calm slightly, his breathing evening out. I don't know if I'm strong enough for that, he whispered. You are, Nira insisted. I've seen it. You're stronger than you think, but you have to trust yourself, Evan. You have to trust that you're worthy of the power this armor offers. The spirit of Derek, it's not here to control you. It's here to guide you, but only if you allow it. Evan hesitated, his eyes searching hers. For a moment it seemed as though he was going to give in to the power, to let the spirit of Derek take over completely. But then slowly he lowered his head, taking a deep breath. The glow of the armor dimmed just slightly, and the weight that had seemed so unbearable lightened a little. Okay, he said, his voice still shaky but resolute. I'll try. Nira smiled, relief flooding her chest. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but it was a start. Evan had taken the first step toward reclaiming control, and that was all they needed, for now. Suddenly the room shook again, a low rumble beneath their feet. Both of them froze, their eyes locking in fear. The ground beneath them trembled as if something powerful was coming. Nira's smile faded as she realized that the true test was still ahead. The armor had awakened a power within Evan, but that power would draw attention, and it wouldn't be long before others, enemies of her people, would come seeking it. The ground beneath them trembled once more. This time the shaking was stronger, more deliberate. The walls of the ancient chamber groaned as if responding to some unseen force. Evan felt it deep in his chest. His heartbeat quickened and the energy of the armor flared up again, stronger than before. He clenched his fists, feeling the power surge through him. But this time he held it back, or at least he tried to. Nira. Evan's voice was low, filled with a mixture of determination and fear. I don't know how much longer I can keep this under control. Nira's gaze flickered from Evan to the trembling walls. The air was thick with tension and she could feel it too, the sense that something was coming. Something dangerous. We need to get out of here, she said urgently, her voice cutting through the noise. Whatever this is, it's coming for the armor, and it won't stop until it gets it. Evan nodded, but as he shifted his weight, the armor seemed to grow heavier. It was as though the very weight of the past was pressing down on him, as if the spirit of Derek was pushing him toward something. The images of battles and warriors flooded his mind again, but this time they were different. The warriors weren't fighting for glory or honor. They were fighting for survival, protecting something far more precious than any victory. Stay close, Nira said, her voice sharp. She had taken on the role of leader, and Evan couldn't help but follow her orders. She was calm under pressure, something he still hadn't quite figured out. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. He needed to control the armor, but he couldn't lose himself again. Not now. As they stepped into the corridor leading out of the chamber, the temperature seemed to drop. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of dust and decay. The sounds of distant movement echoed through the halls, growing louder, closer. Nira glanced nervously over her shoulder, but Evan couldn't tear his eyes from the armor. The glow was faint now, but he could still feel its power, still hear the voice of Derek in his mind. It was more than a whisper now. It was like a constant drumbeat, a reminder that he wasn't just Evan anymore. He was something else, something ancient. You have to stay focused, Evan, Nira said, her voice barely above a whisper. Whatever's coming, we have to be ready. Before Evan could answer, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor, followed by the unmistakable clang of armor. Nira's eyes widened as she turned to face him. She could feel the tension in the air, the sense that something was wrong. Something was watching them. We're not alone, she said softly, her voice tight with fear. Evan's muscles tensed, and his instincts screamed for him to fight. The armor responded as if it recognized the danger. The power surged through him again, filling him with a burning desire to act. He could feel the spirit of Derek pushing him forward, urging him to embrace the fight. But Evan held his ground, his hand instinctively reaching for the blade that wasn't there. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but he knew he had to keep his head. Stay calm, Nira whispered. We don't know who they are yet. As the footsteps grew louder, the figures appeared at the end of the corridor. 3 alien soldiers, their faces hidden behind dark helmets, moved with precision. They were armed, each holding a weapon that hummed with power. The air around them crackled with energy, and Evan's body instinctively tensed. "We're not here to fight," one of the soldiers said in a deep, gravelly voice. "But we will if we have to." Evan clenched his jaw, the spirit of Derek urging him to draw his weapon, to fight with the strength of the ancients. But he held back, fighting the urge. He wasn't sure who these soldiers were, but he knew that this wasn't the time for battle. "Not yet. Who are you?" Nira asked, her voice calm but wary. She stepped in front of Evan, protecting him in a way that was both comforting and frightening. She had always been the one who knew what to do, who understood the ways of her people. Evan realized in that moment how much he had come to depend on her. "We are hunters," the soldier replied, "and we've come for the armor." Evan's heart skipped a beat. He could feel the power of the armor shift, as if it were reacting to the soldier's words. It wasn't just a piece of metal. It was more than that. It was a relic, a symbol of strength, and now others wanted it. "No," Nira said, her voice firm. "You can't have it. It belongs to my people." The soldier's eyes narrowed, but the leader remained calm. "The armor is more than a symbol. It is a weapon, and weapons are meant to be used." Before Nira could respond, the leader raised his hand, and in a flash the soldiers advanced, their weapons drawn. Evan's body responded before his mind could catch up. The armor flared with energy, and he felt the power of the ancients surge through him. The battle had begun, but this time it was different. Evan wasn't being controlled by the armor. He wasn't just a vessel for the spirit of Derek. He was fighting for something that belonged to him. To them, Evan stepped forward, his body moving with precision. The weight of the armor no longer felt like a burden. It was a part of him, a tool that he could use, not something that controlled him. His hands moved in a blur, and before the soldiers could react, Evan disarmed one of them, knocking his weapon aside with a fluid, graceful movement. The soldier stumbled backward, clearly taken off guard by the strength and speed of his opponent. Nira watched in awe as Evan moved with a confidence and skill she had never seen before. The armor was not just a weapon, it was a part of him now, a part of who he was becoming. The battle was fast and brutal, but Evan was in control. But even as he fought, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The soldiers were skilled, but they weren't the real threat. They were just a distraction, a test of Evan's resolve. The real challenge was yet to come. The leader of the soldiers stepped forward, his weapon raised. Evan was ready. He had faced countless challenges in his life, but this was different. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for the legacy of his people, for the future of those who had come before him. "You will not take the armor," Evan said, his voice steady, filled with a quiet strength. The leader paused, his eyes narrowing as he studied Evan. There was something different about him, something that the armor had awakened, something that made him more than just a soldier. He was becoming something more. "You are a fool," the leader said, his voice cold. "The armor does not belong to you." Evan's eyes burned with determination. He was ready, and for the first time since he had donned the armor, he felt a sense of peace. He wasn't fighting just to survive. He was fighting to protect something greater than himself. In one swift movement, Evan struck, his fist landing squarely against the leader's chest. The soldier stumbled back, knocked off balance by the force of the blow. He raised his weapon again, but Evan was faster. He moved with the grace of a warrior, his body flowing in perfect harmony with the armor. With one final strike, the leader fell to the ground. The soldiers hesitated, clearly unsure of how to proceed. Their leader had fallen, and they were no longer sure of their mission. Evan stood tall, his chest rising and falling with each breath, his mind clear for the first time since he had put on the armor. The spirit of Derek was still there, but it no longer controlled him. It was a part of him, a guide, not a master. Nira stepped forward, her voice filled with both relief and pride. "You did it, Evan. You controlled the armor." Evan nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the fallen soldiers. "It's not over. There are others who want this armor, and they won't stop until they get it." But for the first time, Evan wasn't afraid. He had taken control. He had proven that he could wield the armor and its power on his own terms. And now, whatever came next, he was ready. The corridor was still, the faint echo of footsteps the only sound breaking the silence. Evan stood over the fallen soldiers, his breath steady but deep, his heart still pounding from the fight. The armor, though heavy, no longer felt like an oppressive weight. It felt like a part of him now, as though he and the spirit of Derek had finally found an understanding. Nira stepped forward, her gaze never leaving the soldiers as she approached Evan. She could see the change in him, the confidence, the clarity in his eyes. The armor no longer controlled him. He had embraced it, and now it was as if the two were one, the warrior and the man intertwined. That was incredible, Nira said, her voice filled with awe. I can't believe you did it. You controlled the power of the armor. Evan nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the soldier still lying at his feet. I didn't just control it, he said, his voice calm. I became it. I had to understand it, not just wear it. It's not about power. It's about being worthy of it. Nira studied him closely. He wasn't the same human who had first donned the armor in her family's chamber. He had changed, not just in strength, but in spirit. He had faced the power of the armor, faced the spirit of Derek, and emerged victorious. The armor had tested him, and Evan had passed. He had proven himself. We're not done yet, Evan said, breaking Nira's thoughts. He was looking ahead, his expression serious, his mind already on the next challenge. There are more who want this armor. The soldiers were just the beginning. I can feel it. There are others out there, and they won't stop until they have it. Nira's heart sank. She had hoped that after the battle they would be able to rest, but she knew that Evan was right. The armor had awakened a power in him that many would desire, and the Scythar had always been a target for those who sought power, for those who craved dominance. But now Evan wasn't just a soldier. He was part of their legacy, a protector of her people's past and future. What do we do now? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. We fight, Evan said, his tone unwavering. We protect it. He reached out to her, offering his hand. Nira hesitated for only a moment before accepting it. There was no doubt in her mind now. Evan was more than just a human soldier. He had become a warrior in his own right, and with him by her side she felt a sense of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. They weren't just defending the armor. They were defending everything it represented. Strength, courage, and the future of the Scythar. The journey ahead was uncertain. Evan knew that, but for the first time since he had arrived on this alien world, he felt ready to face whatever came their way. He had found something inside himself, something he didn't know was there. The spirit of Derek had given him strength, but it was his own heart, his own will that had allowed him to stand firm against the power. They moved quickly through the corridors, Nira guiding the way. The air was thick with tension, and the sound of their footsteps echoed in the silence. Evan could feel the weight of their mission bearing down on them. The soldiers they had defeated were just the tip of the iceberg. There would be others, more powerful, more relentless. But Evan had something they didn't. He had the strength of the armor, yes, but more importantly, he had the resolve to use it for the right reasons. As they reached the exit of the building, Nira paused, turning to him. Evan, are you sure you're ready for this? This isn't what you came here for. You came as a soldier to help us. But now, it's different. Evan looked at her, his expression softening for the first time in hours. I didn't come here to fight for a piece of metal. I came here to help you. But now I realize that this armor, this power, it's more than that. It's about something greater than me. Something that's been forgotten. Nira's eyes searched his face, trying to understand. What do you mean? Evan's eyes grew distant for a moment, as if seeing something far away. The armor, it's a link to the past. It's a reminder of what we can be when we stand together, when we protect each other. The armor isn't just a weapon. It's a symbol of our strength, of everything that came before us. But it's also a warning. A warning? Nira asked, confused. The spirit of Derek, Evan said quietly. He wasn't just a warrior. He was a protector. But the armor also carries the burden of those who wore it before. It's not just a tool of power. It's a test. And if we fail, we lose everything. Nira took a deep breath, the weight of his words sinking in. She had never thought of the armor in that way. She had always seen it as a relic, something that represented her people's history. But Evan was right. It wasn't just about strength, it was about responsibility. And now Evan had become a part of that responsibility. The legacy of the Scythar rested on his shoulders, and he knew it. But it wasn't a burden he would carry alone. We won't fail, Nira said, her voice steady. Not with you by my side. Evan nodded, his expression hardening with resolve.
He knew what lay ahead.
But no matter what challenges awaited them, he was ready to face them. They stepped out into the light, the bright sun shining down on them as they made their way toward the horizon. The armor that Evan wore was not just a shield, it was a sign of a new beginning, a new legacy, one that would shape the future of the Zithar and of Earth. And as long as they fought together, they could face whatever came next. The path ahead was uncertain, but Evan was no longer afraid. He had found his place among the stars, and with Nira by his side, he knew they would stand strong against whatever challenges the universe had in store.